Carnival of Blood, an original short story by Brian Hall and Angelique Novak. It was that time at the beginning of October when all the trees were ablaze with oranges, yellows, reds, and some lovely browns. Sarah and Jamie enjoyed the view as they drove to the mall. They went to the food court first and each got a pumpkin spice latte. While walking around the mall, they were talking about going to the carnival that weekend. It was also their friend Tanya's birthday that week. That was their main reason for being at the mall that day. Sarah wanted to get a new charm for Tanya's charm bracelet. She loved that bracelet and wore it everywhere. Tanya was very much into the paranormal, so Sarah and Jamie were hoping to find her some spooky charms for her bracelet. They went into the gothic jewelry store, Fierce Pierce, wincing as they passed by a guy getting his tongue pierced. "That's not going to help him with the ladies," Jamie laughed quietly. Sarah laughed too. They went to the back of the store where the charms and other jewelry displays were. "I know she already has a Ouija board," Sarah said to Jamie while they both were looking at all of the charms. "So I'm trying to find a planchette charm to go with it. Keep a lookout for me." "No problem," Jamie said while flipping through charm cards with the last bit of her pumpkin spice latte sputtering up the straw. "Hey, do you think she'd like this one?" She held up a small white ghost. "Oh, hell yeah." Sarah kept walking around the stand that had all the charms. She luckily finally found a planchette. "This one is awesome. Look, it even has a tiny, shiny skull on it," she said to Jamie. The music started blaring at the back of the store. Jamie gave her a thumbs up when she showed her the charm. On their way to the checkout, the guy getting his tongue pierced was gone. The counter was near the piercing chair. They saw that their least favorite clerk was going to be ringing them up. Sarah and Jamie exchanged glances before putting the charms on the counter. "Well, aren't these cute? Much too cool for you two, though. You sure you didn't get lost and miss the American Girl store?" Sarah looked at her name tag and stared her dead in the eye. "Raven?" "Really, Becky? You're trying to be Raven now? Just ring us up." They'd all known each other since elementary school. They didn't get along then, and they definitely didn't get along now in high school. Becky's pale face flushed for a moment as she scanned the barcodes. She put the charms in separate bags while adjusting her wool cap, telling each of them their total. She'd had gauges for a few years now, but the ones she had in today were new. They were inverted pentagrams with a red, shiny gem in the center, matching her nose ring. On their way out, Becky, Raven, yelled to them, "Have fun picking out your matching pink dresses for your dolls." Jamie looked over her shoulder back at her, replying with her middle finger raised, "Have fun with those onion ring earlobes when you're in a home." Sarah laughed. "Onion ring earlobes, that's fantastic, Jamie." They were squinting on their way through the parking lot. It was a beautiful sunny blue fall sky, and talking more about the carnival. They were both excited about it, particularly because they were going to give Tanya the charms they just got her for her birthday. "I know she's going to love these, Jamie. They're totally going to make her day, especially since Kyle has been an absolute dick to her lately, again." Jamie shook her head in agreement, adding, "Yeah, I know." "Why doesn't she dump him for good already? She can do so much better. I know a couple guys that are dying to ask her out." While Sarah was putting the key in her car door, Jamie went to the passenger side. As they both got into the car, Sarah asked her, "Did you see the creepy people setting up the carnival over the last few days?" Jamie shook her head no. Sarah continued, "The old trucks had creepy, what I think was Romanian writing on them that said, Dragomir's Carnivalul Sangalui." Jamie was looking at her phone, tapping at it for a moment, then said to Sarah, "I just looked that up. Dragomir is the family name, but the rest means Carnival of Blood. Oh, creepy." I was already really craving a foot-long corn dog there, but now I want to go even more. Sarah smiled. I know. I've been craving cheese curds since they started setting up. Definitely want to get some of those and get my fortune told. I saw a fortune teller gypsy wagon going into the lot the other day on the way home from school. Do you think Clint and Steve will win us any carnival prizes? Jamie asked Sarah. Exhaling slowly and reaching for the radio to change the station, Sarah said, I know Clint will probably win one for me. For you, I'm sure Steve will try. We both know he's always been a klutz. They both laughed, smiling at each other, until a few seconds later when Sarah suddenly cranked the wheel as hard as she could to the side. A large, shaggy black dog was standing absolutely still in front of Sarah's car several yards ahead. At first, Jamie didn't see it. She'd been staring into her phone at that instant. She was texting Steve about what they'd just learned about the carnival's name. She was buckled in but still lurched forward a bit. What the fuck, Sarah? Jamie screamed. Sarah pointed her trembling finger in front of them, and Jamie saw it. The black dog was still standing there, glaring at them. It gave a strong, haughty, exhaled snort, with its neck up and teeth bared slightly, before trotting off into the brilliantly fall-colored woods. You okay, Jamie? Jamie looked pretty stunned, but shook her head. Yes. That was weird. I didn't see it at all. It's like it just appeared there. The next day, Clint and Steve picked Sarah and Jamie up. They started heading toward the carnival when Steve lit up a joint. All four of them were talking about the different carnival foods they wanted to have and attractions that they wanted to go to. Clint asked Sarah if they were picking Tanya up. She said, no. I talked to Tanya the other day. She's back with Kyle again, so he's bringing them. I told her I'd call her when we get there to meet up somewhere. He nodded. After coughing a little, Steve said, she's back with that prick again. Wow. They parked by a beautiful, bright orange maple tree. Steve dropped the remains of his roach on the ground, twisting the ball of his foot on it, then kicked it into the dirt by the tree. There was a gnarled old man taking cash for tickets at the front gate. Above him was a banner with Dragomir's Carnivalul Sangelui on it. They saw some old-timey, painted carnival attraction canvases hanging on the makeshift walls around him. A girl about their age was speaking to the old man with tears in her eyes. Have you seen my boyfriend? He's got really dark brown hair and he's about 6'2". He's wearing jeans, a see-the t-shirt, and a brown jacket. He was just going to his car to put away a big stuffed animal he won for me. He was supposed to come right back. But that was half an hour ago. The old man didn't say a word. He just shook his head no, continuing to take money and give tickets. She turned around, going back into the carnival, asking other people if they'd seen her boyfriend. They also noticed a variety of oddly posed mannequins by the entrance. They didn't quite look like the mannequins at any given store. All of them had sad expressions. The majority of them looked like they were about to start sobbing. Another strange thing about them was that they looked like they weren't made of plastic or plaster. One of them was dressed like a flower child, with a fringed leather jacket, round sunglasses, bell-bottoms, and straight long hair. Another was wearing a hoop skirt, like a Southern belle, and was holding a parasol. They all thought they were strange, but liked it as part of the creepy carnival atmosphere. The energetic conversations, carnival music, game announcers, and noise of the rides hit them all at once after getting their tickets. Man, it's loud, Clint yelled. He pointed toward the first set of tables several yards away. Come on, let's go over there. They all sat down, able to hear each other much better. What do you guys want to do first? Sarah asked. Jamie smiled, pointing at a corn dog stand. You know that was first on my list. Me too. I hope they have Dr. Pepper, Steve said. I'm getting a burger and some fries first. Whoa, guys, look at that. Clint was looking up and across the way. One of the carnival guys was walking by on stilts that were at least 10 feet tall. "Holy crap," Sarah said while taking out her phone. "I'm going to call Tanya and let her know we're here." After a few moments, "Hey, happy birthday. Call me when you get here and we'll meet you guys someplace. There's some gypsy dude walking around on stilts." Jamie and Steve went to the corn dog stand. He bought Jamie and himself each a soda and a foot-long corn dog, slathering his with mustard. Jamie grabbed several napkins for him. "Here, I know you're going to need these." They laughed and sat at the table. "We'll save these seats for you guys," she yelled to Sarah and Clint as they made their way to the burger booth. Sarah waved her hand at her in acknowledgement, holding Clint's hand with the other. Clint got a burger and fries for himself, sodas for both of them, and a large cup of French fries for Sarah. Walking back to the table, they heard some of the carnies yelling something in Romanian at each other. They kept gesturing behind themselves. One of them looked at her with a sideways, missing teeth smile. She looked away from him quickly, but saw another mannequin standing behind them. "Did you hear back from Tanya while you were over there?" Jamie asked. Sarah shook her head no while biting into a crispy, salty, ketchup-tipped fry. In between bites, they all were discussing the different booths they wanted to check out for shopping. The girls thought it looked like they had some cool jewelry and clothing stands. "We're definitely hitting those," Jamie said after swallowing a bite of corn dog. "Damn, this is good." She took a sip of her soda. Nothing beats a carnival corn dog. Clint noticed a booth from their table that had swords and other bladed weapons. He tipped his head up to Steve at that booth behind him. "Awesome," he said, turning back around, smiling. Clint and Steve had been best friends since first grade. They'd played sword fights and knights many times with each other growing up, even a few times rather recently as teenagers. A lot of the midway was visible from where they were. Some of the games looked fun and possibly winnable. The rides were going full force. They were excited to go on some of those. They didn't look too rickety. While they were finishing up their first taste of the day, a pretty young, dark-haired woman in a long skirt and peasant top stopped at their table. "Oh my, look at you girls, so pretty." She had the same accent as the toothless carnies. She reached into her embroidered, bejeweled satchel bag hanging off her hip while complimenting them. "Here," she said, handing 4 tickets to the group, her bracelets jangling against each other. "These are free passes for our haunted house." Clint took the tickets. They all smiled and thanked her. "Yes, you beauties will do quite nicely." She took a drink from an unlabeled, ancient-looking brown glass bottle. She then walked away toward the midway and disappeared in the crowd. Sarah and Jamie looked at each other quizzically. Sarah asked, "We'll do quite nicely." She paused. "To go into a haunted house. That's a weird thing to say." "Yeah, maybe they've got human traffickers hiding in there on the lookout for new merchandise," Jamie laughed. "That's cool, we can get in there for free," Steve said, standing up. "Let's go check things out." One of the jewelry stands was next to the weapons booth. Steve and Clint went in there while Jamie and Sarah were looking at the jewelry. It all looked like old world, foreign, handmade pieces. "I hope Tanya gets here soon. She'd love everything in here," Jamie said. She was looking at a necklace that seemed to be made of bones. "You're right." Sarah took her phone out again, leaving another message. "It's pretty cool here. Jamie and I are at a really cool jewelry booth right now. You'd never want to leave it, Tanya." Jamie asked the woman running the stand about the necklace. "Are these actual polished bones?" The woman looked like she was about mid to late 30s. Her clothing looked much older. After a brief moment, she looked Jamie in the eye. She said with the same accent as the other carnival workers, "Yes, they are, among other things." Then she looked away, not even at a different customer. "What kind of animal?" Jamie waited patiently for about 30 seconds. Annoyed, she snapped her fingers in front of the woman's face. The woman turned her head slowly back to Jamie. An eerie, almost malevolent smile crept across her face. Does it really matter, pretty one? Aren't we all animals from the beginning and in the end? A chilly breeze shot by Jamie's legs, up to her face, caressing it for a second. She put the necklace back, shuddered a little, and said, "Okay." She went over to Sarah, who was looking at some jewelry. "Girl, we've got to go," she said under her breath. The woman hadn't moved an inch and was a few feet to her side, still staring out at nothing. "Why?" Sarah asked, puzzled. "I really like this necklace. Look at the cool stone. I've never seen this kind before. See all the different vibrant colors in the sunlight. Look how they change and dance." Jamie grabbed her arm with some force. Yeah, I see it. That's great. Now we've got to go." The woman turned her head somewhat rigidly toward them and said, "It is a fire opal. Very beautiful. A beauty should have it. Have your man buy it for you. It must be a gift, beauty." Jamie practically dragged Sarah away from the jewelry stand, going over to the weapons booth where the guys were. Sarah could have sworn that she caught a glimpse of another one of those mannequins in the shadows toward the back of the jewelry stand as she staggered sideways. Clint and Steve were trying out swords and battle axes. "Having fun, guys?" Sarah chuckled. Clint bowed. "Indeed, my lady." Steve was looking at some daggers, holding a broadsword. "Jamie, check it out. I'm getting this," he said while lifting up the sword. "Cool." Clint was holding a battle axe and told Sarah he was getting that. "That's really cool," she said. Steve and Clint bought their weapons and they all left the booth. "Steve, give me your sword. I'm going to go put these in my car. Don't want to be lugging them around all day." Steve handed him his sword and Clint went to the parking lot. There were people watching until Clint came back and getting a bit closer to the midway. "Prize every time." They all heard one game operator barking at people passing by. She had the same accent. Clint rejoined them and they started walking past the games. Steve almost tripped on one of the mats covering some huge power cords. They all laughed. One of the kid roller coasters clambered on the track next to them, delightful squeals accompanying it. "Remember being that little?" Steve asked Jamie, putting an arm around her shoulder, planting a kiss on her cheek. She smiled and blew a kiss back to him. "Oh, yeah. Then when the year finally came when you got all excited because you finally met the height requirement for the bigger rides." As they passed some rides and more games, Clint's eyes lit up. "Guys, look, they've got live alligators and a show. Let's go see." "Awesome," Steve and the girls said. Sarah checked her phone for any messages from Tanya. Not a single one yet. They all sat with each other on the bleacher overlooking the gator pool that was surrounded by a fence. The gator pool was a few feet deep and had about 15 alligators in it. There were two really big ones, maybe 20 feet long each. The others were probably between 10 to 15 feet long, all of them big enough to trigger that primal fear at the back of your chest toward your spine, knowing that if they weren't enclosed, you'd want to get the hell away from them. Another accented carnival worker announced to the crowd that the next show would be starting in a few minutes. They were all excited and wondered what the show would be about. They'll probably feed them some raw chickens, maybe touch them a bit on the snout for a scare factor. Should be cool, Clint said. Steve and Clint exchanged glances. "Since we've got a few minutes, why don't we?" Steve said, putting his thumb and finger to his mouth, pointing behind a noisy game booth, to Clint. Clint kissed the top of Sarah's head and pointed to where they were going. She nodded. Sarah left another message for Tanya. "She still hasn't called you back?" Jamie asked her. She shook her head no. They probably had another fight. I wouldn't put it past Kyle to smash her phone on the ground or against a wall. "Yeah, could be. But I hope we hear from her. I really want to give her the charms we got for her bracelet." Jamie agreed. Jamie tapped Sarah on the shoulder, pointing across from the gator pool. She was pointing at the Carnies trailers parked on the other side of the carnival fence. Hey, another one of those mannequins. Those are all over the place. I know, but it's funny they put that one in roller skates. The worker took a drink from an old, unlabeled brown glass bottle, then announced that the show would be starting in 2 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, now is the time to take your seats and prepare to witness the absolute raw and unforgiving power of nature. Clint and Steve came sauntering back over, laughing. They sat down by the girls, excited to see the show. Nature is fierce and unsympathetic, the announcer started saying, looking at all the audience members. Every living creature must do whatever it takes to survive, and to ensure the survival of their young. You are about to see how driven and unyielding those instincts are. A few other carnies came out from a tent to the left, carrying damp, dripping, red-stained burlap sacks. Each of them started pulling out chunks of meat that didn't really resemble chicken. Sarah and Jamie looked at each other. Without needing to say a word about that, Jamie said, "Even if those are chickens, why would they bring them out bloody? It's not like they're trying to attract sharks. The gators are right there, they can see, and more than likely smell the food." Sarah thought that was odd as well. Yeah, maybe it's more like livestock, like sheep or goats. Maybe they think the blood makes a better show, so they bring them out freshly killed and still juicy. She looked up and across the carnival fence to where all of the workers' living quarters were parked. 2 carny workers were carrying what looked like a gurney with something underneath the tarp covering it. Movement caught her eye. The mannequin they both had seen just a few minutes ago was a good 20 yards from where it had been. It was glaring at them. A cold breeze wrapped around her face, making her shudder. Clint and Steve were absolutely giddy watching the gators gulping down the strange, bloody meat chunks of mysterious origin. They didn't seem to notice that it didn't look like chickens. They were enthralled with the death rolls, the ferocity of the gators thrashing and throwing the now turning red water out of the pool, snapping at each other over the large pieces of flesh. When all the meat had been devoured, one of the carny guys approached the biggest gator. He tapped it on the snout. The audience gasped. It quickly snapped its powerful jaws at him, then shut. Clint thought he saw something in its mouth, something that resembled a guy's hand. He shook it off, thinking, Steve brought some killer death shit. That was the end of show. They ventured back into the carnival. Sarah said to Clint, "Come with me over to that jewelry stand. There was a necklace I liked and want to get, but the chick told me it had to be a gift from you." "Hey, guys," Clint said to Jamie and Steve, "we're going back to the jewelry stand by the weapons for a minute." Steve said, "Okay." Jamie gave Sarah a little bit of a strange look. "You're going to deal with that weirdo again?" Sarah smiled and shook her head. "Yes." "Okay." She smacked Steve playfully on his upper arm. "Steve, let's go see if you can win me a prize every time." She laughed. "Yeah, that just might be your best bet with me." Steve smiled. They went to the prize every time game. "I hope it's still there. It was really pretty. They had some guy stuff too," Sarah said to Clint. "Cool. I might get a small knife at the weapons both while we're over there. Something pocket-sized. I think they had some stiletto switchblades. I've always wanted one." The odd woman was still there. This time she had a scarf on her head. She looked a few years older, Sarah briefly thought to herself. A huge smile spread across her face when she saw the necklace was still there. Sarah was delighted as Clint handed the woman some cash. The woman looked at Sarah throughout the entire transaction. "I set it aside for you, beauty. It belongs with you." She took a drink from an old brown glass bottle. "Thank you," she said, putting it on immediately. She smiled at Clint, giving him a kiss. "Thank you so much, sweetie. I love it." Her smile faded quickly, however. It was replaced with a startled look as they turned toward the weapons booth. She stopped dead in her tracks. "What?" Clint asked her. Between the jewelry stand and weapons booth stood a mannequin. Sarah pointed to it. "That mannequin," she said. "What about it? They've got a bunch of them around." "Yeah, but this one. She's wearing Tanya's charm bracelet. She wears that everywhere. Why is the mannequin wearing it?" She got a little closer to the mannequin, and more shock flashed across her face. "This one even looks like her." He shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe she was short on cash and traded it to the gypsy chick for something else." He stepped a little closer toward the mannequin. "You think this looks like her? I guess maybe a little." "I doubt it. She loves that bracelet." "And are you kidding me? I swear this mannequin looks incredibly like Tanya. It's not funny." Sarah took a picture of the bracelet and the mannequin's face. "I don't see it, but whatever. Are you sure it's her charm bracelet?" She nodded, one hand on her hip, giving him a, "I can't believe you don't believe me." "Look, yeah, there's the Ouija board charm right there that I got the planchette charm to go with for her birthday. I'm going to call her again." A gust of wind swirled around their feet, along with some orange and yellow leaves. "All right, you'd know better than me. I guess it kind of looks like her. I'm going to check out the small knives. Then, I don't know why, but I really want some mini donuts." He laughed at his own little munchies joke. Still no answer. She left another message for Tanya. She got away from the mannequin as quickly as she could. It was giving her the creeps. Clint came back over with a stiletto. "Look, babe," Clint exclaimed while playing with his new toy. Sarah was still a little uneasy. "Uh-huh, that's really cool, Clint." She was pulled out her troubled thoughts when she heard, "Guys, it really is a prize every time," Jamie shouted as she and Steve rejoined them. "Look at the weird little doll Steve won for me. I think it might be like a gypsy voodoo doll. It smells funny and the body feels like there's something weird in it. Maybe rice, but look how awesome." The small doll was burlap, wearing a gypsy skirt and low-cut top. The eyes and mouth were stitched shut. The hair was surprisingly lifelike. It had a heart sewn onto the chest, above the top's neckline. There was a small nail in the center of it. "Look at how creepy it is. I love it." Sarah squeezed it after touching the realistic-looking and feeling hair. There were little bumps in the middle. "Yeah, that's awesomely creepy. Way to go, Steve." She fist-bumped him, smiling. "That's cool. Good job, man," Clint said to Steve and Jamie, giving him a high five. They went to the mini donut stand, Steve, all puffed up, smiling. He was obviously proud of himself. While waiting in line, Jamie noticed Sarah's necklace. "That is pretty. Was the same chick still there?" "Yeah, and get this. One of those mannequins was standing next to the stand, wearing Tanya's charm bracelet." Jamie looked confused while they moved up in line. "No, it couldn't have been. You sure it wasn't just one of their own bracelets that they were displaying?" "I'm sure. It had her Ouija board charm on it, and others that I recognized. She hasn't called me back yet either. Here, I took 2 pictures." She held her phone out, showing Jamie the photos. She was silent for a moment. "Well, I guess when we find her, she can explain about her bracelet. I wouldn't put stealing past that gypsy chick. You saw how weird downtown she was acting before, but it's really strange that the mannequin actually does look like her." "I know, and maybe it was stolen off of her. Clint thinks she traded it. Either way, wouldn't that mean that Tanya had been here already? She told me the other day that we'd all be here together today. She never mentioned going to the carnival without us." "Sarah, you want to split a large?" Clint asked after finally reaching the counter. "Yeah, that would be perfect, thanks. I'm saving room for cheese curds and cotton candy, too." Steve asked Jamie the same. She split a large with him, too. This time, they walked and ate. They spotted a really old-fashioned-looking gypsy wagon that had a sign out reading, "Fortunes Told." Steve said excitedly, "Oh, we are so going there. I'm totally getting my fortune told." "Me too," they all said. Sarah licked some cinnamon sugar off her top lip and said, "Maybe the fortune teller can tell us where the fuck Tanya and Kyle are. It's her birthday, and we," pointing to herself and Jamie back and forth several times, "would really like to give her her presents and make sure she has a fun birthday. You know that asshole, Kyle, doesn't care about doing anything like that for her." They went up the little staircase into the gypsy wagon. The walls were draped in very rich tones of purple, blue, and green velveteen swags. There were ancient-looking candles with all the old wax drippings running down them, all around the small wagon room. Rose incense kissed the air. In the center of the room was a very gypsy-dressed woman. She looked like she was possibly in her late 40s. She had a deck of tarot cards and a crystal ball on top of the celestial tablecloth, draping the table in front of her. She looked up from the table. With the same accent, "Please sit, Steve." They all gave each other a look. There was no way she heard them say his name outside. "You wish to know your fate?" "No?" Steve nodded, sat down, and said, "Yeah, I really do. Give me your right hand." The fortune teller studied his palm for a few moments, then abruptly let go of it. "You're going to have a long, happy, successful life." Steve smiled and asked for a tarot reading. The cards he got were the Devil, the Tower, and Death. The fortune teller said, "Don't worry, it is not literal." "Not usually. The devil is in your past. That could have just been dark times for you. Death, more often than not, means transition or change in your life. The tower does signify a fall from grace. Maybe you've recently been fired, or something about your life or yourself changed for the worse. Or it is going to. There is always an upside after the fall, at least for most. There's nothing about college or my future career path, or how long this little hottie is going to stay with me before she wises up." He pointed at Jamie, trying to chuckle. You could see the nervousness in his eyes, not the reading that he probably expected nor wanted. The fortune teller shook her head. "No." "Who's next?" "I'll go next," Jamie said, after practically lunging for Jamie's hand. "Your future is filled with beautiful things, pretty one." When she read her tarot cards, Jamie also received the death card. The other two were different and positive. "Don't fret, like I told your man. That is hardly ever literal. Almost always just about transition." Jamie kind of laughed. "Oh, good. But isn't that a little strange that we both got the death card? The worlds of the unseen and seen are always strange." Clint sat down next. His palm reading said that he'd also have a long and happy life. His tarot card reading said that he'd face some struggles, but would get through them. He also got the death card. "Okay, now that's got to be weird even for you," he said to the fortune teller. She smiled slightly and took a sip from an old brown glass bottle. "You would be surprised." "Well, I guess that leaves me," Sarah said. She had a positive palm reading, the fortune teller saying that her future was filled with beautiful things as well. The tarot card reading was rather positive, until she turned the last card over. Sarah pushed her chair back, knocking it over, jumping up. "There is no fucking way, that just came up for the 4th time." It was the death card. "Do you have more than one of those in that deck? That's not funny, lady." "Calm yourself, Sarah. You'll give yourself frown lines. You would not want that, beauty. No, there is only one of each card in the deck. The fates had the same message for all of you, that is all." They left the fortune teller's wagon, back into the crisp fall day. They all thought that getting the same card was pretty strange, were a little unnerved, and needed to shake it off with some rides. Just as they were stepping into their roller coaster cars, They smelled a familiar, appetizing carnival aroma. "Great, now I want popcorn," Clint said. Climbing the first hill, they all saw different mannequins peppered throughout the entire carnival. All of them were posed differently. They all pointed them out to each other right before plunging down the first drop. Delighted screams emitting from everyone on the ride, despite the cold wind blasting their faces. They were all laughing when the ride was over. "That was actually intense and pretty fun for a traveling carnival's roller coaster," Sarah said. "Hell yeah, but now I want that popcorn," Clint said, holding Sarah's hand. The popcorn stand also sold soft pretzels. Jamie and Steve each got one, covered in salt, cheese, and a few jalapeno slices. Clint was sharing his popcorn with Sarah as they walked to the next ride. It was one of those rides where you sit in what looks like bleachers, then it goes up in a circle and around, sometimes pausing at the top, straight up. They all piled into it after their snacks. This ride was right next to some very large and very loud speakers that were blaring Boston's "More Than a Feeling," then Poison and other classic 70s and 80s rock. When it stopped at the very top, being straight up and down, they were all looking around at everything below them. "Damn, they really love those mannequins," Jamie shouted. Steve, Sarah, and Clint all nodded in agreement before quickly dropping to the side and doing a few full circles at high speed before the ride was over. While getting off of the ride, Steve turned around to look at it. None of them had noticed before, but the painting on the front of the ride, the part where everybody sits in, was a little more disturbing than fun. It was an old forest with people in hooded robes, a giant fire burning in the center of them, with something cooking on a spit. The something didn't look like an animal. Jamie grabbed his wrist and yanked him forward. "Let's go, dude. We've got some more rides to go on before it starts getting really chilly." The wind had picked up and some clouds were starting to roll in on the horizon. They passed a mannequin wearing a Cyndi Lauper World Tour t-shirt. She even had 80s styled hair, big and very hairsprayed. After they went on a few more rides, Sarah checked her phone. Still no messages from Tanya, just one from Sarah's mom about nothing in particular. "I'm going to try Tanya again." "Wow, she's usually not like that. Now I'm getting a bit worried," Jamie said. "I'll see if she's called me." She checked her messages. "No, nothing on my end either." "I wouldn't worry about it too much, guys," Clint said, trying to offer some relief. "Maybe Kyle is actually trying to be decent to her and took her out for a birthday dinner." Steve nodded, even though they both really didn't believe that. They still wanted to have a good time with their girlfriends without Kyle screwing it up by making them worry about Tanya. Sarah and Jamie shrugged. "Maybe," they both said in unison. Sarah lit up when she saw a cheese curd stand ahead of them. "Look, finally, cheese curds. I'm getting some now." On the way there, Jamie spotted a crowd of people standing by and sitting on some log stumps. There were kids mixed in. They were watching a marionette puppet show. Jamie was now elated, being a die-hard puppet and marionette lover. "Look," she ran over to the puppet show. To her disappointment, it was ending. Everyone was standing and walking away. Then one of the workers, with the same accent, announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, little ones of all ages, the next show will be starting in just a few minutes." Looking directly at Jamie, he smiled, rubbed his rough hand across his scruffy jaw and chin. "So, take your seats now." He winked at her before walking behind the marionette show booth. They all sat as other people, and some kids started sitting around them. Sarah was pulling and tearing into her golden brown, greasy, gooey, salty cheese curds, offering Jamie and the guys some. The wind was starting to pick up a little more, and the clouds were getting closer. The curtain on the puppet booth raised, revealing a hooded, robed marionette. It was an old man looking at the audience. "Silence. It begins now." He bounced, walked off the stage. Several more marionettes came out. 2 teenage girls and 2 teenage guys walking around and talking. Oddly enough, talking about a carnival. The story was like they were watching themselves from throughout the day. After a few minutes of the puppets making jokes, getting the audience to laugh, some dark gray fabric clouds were lowered from the top. They were above the puppets' heads. One looked up, pointing. "Oh no, it looks like a storm is coming. We better go inside that house." A rundown mansion prop was brought into view from the side of the stage. The puppets went to the house and the curtain dropped. Some thunder sound effects were made as the curtain rose again. The guy puppets were gone. The old man puppet was standing by the girl puppets. "At last you are here. Now we can replenish ourselves." The girl puppets screamed, raising their arms straight up, bouncing around to run in place. The old man got closer, raising one arm, pointing at the girls. He said some words in a different language. The girls fell over and a big puff of dark blue smoke blew up from the bottom of the stage. When it cleared, the girl puppets were no longer there. 2 miniature versions of the mannequins that were all throughout the carnival had taken their places, wearing the same clothes as the girl puppets. The old man was now young, still in his hooded robe. The curtain closed. When it reopened, there were several alligator marionettes, some with chunks of meat in their mouth, others with what appeared to be shreds of the clothing that the guy puppets were wearing. Another thunder sound effect was made as the curtain closed for the final time. The audience was silent. "I don't get it," one kid said. That thought was clear across almost every face. The announcer came back around and thanked everyone for watching the show. He didn't take his eyes off of Jamie and Sarah. "Okay," Steve said. "That was definitely different. Cool puppets, though. They looked pretty old." "Yeah, they did," Jamie agreed. She looked a bit puzzled, like everybody else there. Maybe the story lost something in translation. That was weird. "I've got to take a piss, guys," Clint said. They all did. The porta potties were at the far end of the carnival, back by the big generators. Another mannequin was by one of them. This one was wearing hip-hugger bell-bottoms and a Yes t-shirt covering her ears. That made them all chuckle a little. The generators were very loud. Steve and Clint partook in some herbs again by the generators. Jamie pulled a small, round, bejeweled flask from her purse, shaking it and smiling at Sarah. They both quenched their thirst. Once everybody was ready to go again, they got some cotton candy. The sun was getting lower and the wind was picking up, whistling around and between them. "Hey, there's the fun house," Steve said. Clint said, "Oh, cool. Let's go." The girls agreed, Sarah saying while closing her coat a little with one hand, "We can get out of the wind for a little bit, too." They passed another mannequin. This one was wearing a Moving Pictures Rush t-shirt. The fun house was 2 stories tall. The front was painted with a giant puppeteer in the center. He was controlling a few marionettes and mannequins. In the background, there were scary clowns, figures that looked like demons, and other carnival sights, one of which was cotton candy wrapped around what looked like a large bone, somewhat like a femur. Creepy carnival music played as they walked into the fun house. Immediately, the floorboards started moving in opposite directions from each other. Everything was flashing from the strobe lights, making it even trickier to not get disoriented and to get past that part of the floor. "Whoa, right out of the gate," Jamie said, smiling and munching on some cotton candy. They were all laughing at the moving floor. The next segment of the floor was a bit bouncy. Everyone inside was putting their arms straight out to their sides, trying to reach the walls with their fingertips for balance. "It's like walking in a bounce house, baked or drunk off your ass," Steve said loudly. The next part led to a dark, spinning tunnel covered in black lights. Steve grabbed onto Jamie to keep his balance going through it. Their glowing blue smiles could be seen as they all went through the tunnel. After the tunnel were stairs going to the second floor. A mannequin with a ribbon-tied ponytail in a poodle skirt and saddle shoes was pointing to go up them. Almost every stair triggered a drop scare prop. Clint laughed when somebody in front of them jumped when a glow-in-the-dark, scary clown face dropped before them. He got startled when a large, glowing blue spider dropped in front of his face. They were all laughing pretty hard at him about that. Clint was the biggest of all of them. A glowing orange bat dropped, flapping its wings in front of Sarah. A glowing purple monster dropped down in front of Jamie. Toward the top of the stairs, a large, glowing green alligator head dropped in front of Steve. It practically hit him in the face. "Damn," Steve said, smiling, getting past that last top step. The top floor started with quite unexpected spinning circles in the floor. Anytime one of them stepped on one, it either spun them around completely and incredibly quickly, or to the side before stopping abruptly. Someone ahead of them fell onto their knee, laughing. Steve almost lost his balance. This time, Jamie grabbed onto him to keep hers. Sarah got dizzy from her circle. That one spun her all the way around twice. Clint did his on one foot. Then came the mirror maze. Almost all of the lights for the maze were just the black light mirror frames. The floor was rising and falling in some places. As they got further into the maze, the creepy carnival music started to fade, replaced by the sound of thunder and lightning crashing. They got separated for a minute or two, hitting dead ends and having to turn around to try a different way. Every dead end had a mannequin. One was pointing in what seemed like a helpful way. One looked particularly terrified. One was reaching out as if to grab passers-by. Another had an eerie, larger-than-natural, unnerving smile pulled across her face. They all heard a girl scream, "Tommy, help!" It seemed like it was coming from ahead of them. It sounded like genuine fear. There was a bench at the end of the maze. A mannequin dressed like a 1920s flapper was holding a black light sign that read, "Take a seat," with an arrow pointing at the bench. The four of them sat down. It moved forward a little. Their legs were dangling. Then they fell onto a wide slide. The slide took them out of the fun house. They were all smiling. None of them expected that to be the way out. "Gemma, Gemma, where are you?" A guy right outside the exit was yelling and looking around frantically. "Hey," he said, running over to them. "I can't find my girlfriend. Have you guys seen a pretty red-headed chick about as tall as you?" Pointing to Sarah. "Around?" They all shook their heads no. "It was pretty dark in there. Were you in there with her?" Sarah asked him. "I was up until the mirrors. We got split up in the mirrors." "Sorry, man. We didn't see your girl, but if you've got a picture of her in your phone, you could try showing it to some of the workers," Clint suggested. "Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll do that." He was looking through his phone and went to one of the first workers around. "Thanks," he yelled back at them. "Hope you find her soon," Steve shouted to him. The clouds were rolling in more. Occasionally, they each spotted a small lightning bolt with a hint of thunder. The sun, in what was left of the open sky, was starting to flirt with the horizon, causing a beautiful display of oranges, pinks, and purples, a picture-perfect fall sunset. More wind swirled around them. Some leaves were mixed in, one getting in Jamie's hair. All of the ride's lights started turning on. Sarah checked her phone. Still nothing. "I guess we'll have to give Tanya her gifts at school on Monday." Clint took out his wallet and pulled out the tickets for the haunted house. This would be a perfect time to use these guys. "I totally forgot about those," Steve said. "Come on, baby." He grabbed Jamie's hand. Clint made a mad dash to the prize every time game. He wanted to win something for Sarah. He won her a creepy gypsy voodoo doll dressed in modern-day clothes with the same bad smell and texture as Jamie's doll. This time there was a mannequin by that game wearing a Bon Jovi, slippery when wet, t-shirt with ripped knees and ratted hair. "Thanks, baby." Sarah hugged him tightly after he gave her the voodoo doll. Menacingly enough, the haunted house was all the way across the carnival from that game, well past the rides and heavy foot traffic. It was getting darker. The clouds were practically taking up the entire sky. Lightning was starting to flash much closer, followed by some deafening cracks of thunder. They heard several people calling out for someone as they made their way to the haunted house. There it was, surprisingly foreboding and large. Dragomir's Casa Skimbari was painted on a sign above the front door. It was only 2 stories, but seemed bigger as it was long and went back much further than expected. The wood was gray, boards hanging by a nail in some places, broken shutters, missing shingles, flickering porch lights, and broken stairs led the way to the peeling paint front door and ticket taker. They handed him their free passes. He took a drink from an old brown glass bottle, gesturing to them to go inside, saying with the same accent, "Enjoy the most terrifying place you'll ever reside in." He had on a Seether t-shirt. Sarah remembered the girl looking for her boyfriend when they first got there. She said her boyfriend was wearing a Seether t-shirt. She blew it off as coincidence as they went inside. After the door shut behind them, surprisingly, it was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Jamie could have sworn she heard it lock. Steve asked her, "Did you hear that?" He heard it being locked too. She squeezed his arm and nodded that she had. "That's kind of weird and probably against fire codes." He held her closer. They all jumped when some heavy metal music started blaring and strobe lights started flashing. The only way forward was a hallway with closed doors and barred, arched stone windows. As they walked by, different people were reaching for and yelling at them. None of them had the Romanian accent, however. "Please, this isn't a joke," one older woman screamed at them, clutching for them through the bars. "They took my daughter and put me in here. I was too old. Let me out, please." She was able to grab onto the front of Steve's shirt. "It's not too late for you or your girlfriend. Get out now. Bring me with you." Jamie took her hand off of Steve. "Wow, you really are dedicated. Fantastic job." Clint and Sarah followed, and the woman told them the same thing, trying to grab either of them, tears rolling down her face. The hallway started getting very narrow. There were other hallways to each side. It was too loud to talk to each other, and the 2 couples went into different hallways. Sarah clung to Clint's arm while they passed an older man in one of the barred window rooms. He reached out and screamed at them. "Please help me. They took my sons. Get me out of here. I have to find them before it's too late." The light flashing behind the man went off. When it came back on a moment later, he was gone. They continued their way through the hall. They heard the hiss of an animatronic butcher that popped out in front of them. He had on a bloody apron and was holding a chainsaw. They both jumped back a bit. Maniacal laughter played as the butcher leaned toward them, chainsaw revving. Clint could have sworn he saw his eyes move, looking at both of them. He figured it was part of the animatronics. That freaked him out a little, though. He grabbed Sarah's wrist and dragged her further down the hall. In between the strobe light flashes, they saw different weapons hanging on the walls. There were also human heads mounted here and there. "So realistic," Sarah shouted. Clint shook his head. There were more mannequins along the way, including a red-headed one that was about Sarah's height. A giant blacklight clown, glowing blue, orange, green, purple, and pink, sprung out at them, laughing like a mental patient. He was holding an axe that came way too close for comfort. One of the doors flung open. A carnival worker charged them, tackling Clint to the floor. He had a knife to his throat. Clint put his hands up. "Love the haunted house, man, but this is a bit much," he screamed at the worker. He expected him to get off of him, but he didn't. "Okay, get off me, man. That's enough." He didn't budge. Clint started struggling with him. Sarah kicked the worker with full force in the balls from behind. He doubled over and rolled off of Clint, dropping the knife, yelling something in Romanian. Sarah immediately grabbed his knife. The music was getting louder and the strobe lights faster. Clint got up, taking his stiletto out of his pocket while they ran up the stairs to the second floor. They were in a panic. There was no door to close behind them. Hearts pounding, chests heaving, they kept running, checking doorknobs along the way. All of them were locked. Clint managed to grab a battle axe off one of the walls. What appeared to be a mannequin leapt out in front of them. With an enraged expression, it went for Sarah, arms outstretched. The terror was well beyond 11. Sarah and Clint not believing what they were seeing. Sarah plunged the knife into its arm. The mannequin let out the most ear-piercing screech either of them had ever heard in their lives. Much like nails on a chalkboard, but far worse. As it shrieked, Clint dropped the stiletto and wrapped his hands so tightly around the battle axe, his knuckles were white. He swung with all his might at the mannequin, shouting to Sarah, "Get down!" It was a perfect, direct hit. The mannequin's head went flying, bouncing off the walls and rolling somewhere out of sight. Clint and Sarah were running to each other when a trap door opened up between them. Clint fell through and it snapped shut. Sarah fell to her knees, frantically clawing at the seams of the trap door with her fingernails to no avail. "Clint! Clint!" she desperately cried out at the floor. Even if he'd responded, there was no way she could hear him over the music. She tried stabbing and prying at the door with Clint's stiletto she'd found on the floor. It was useless. That trap door wasn't opening from her side. During her frenzy of trying to save Clint, not even able to try to wrap her head around what had just happened before he fell through, the mashed nuts worker had come up the stairs. He'd been hiding in the shadows. Sarah let out a blood-curdling scream as he wrapped his arms around her waist, squeezing her as tightly as possible, dragging her into one of the rooms that had been locked before. He threw her into the room with inhuman strength. Her head hit a heavy, large wooden table. She saw stars at the edges of her vision before blacking out. When Steve and Jamie took their separate way down a different hallway on the first floor, they were greeted by animatronic hisses of a few alligators in one recessed part of the hallway. One of them had what they thought was a prop of a human man's leg in its jaws. It had a bloody Nike shoe on. The music was getting louder and the strobe lights faster for them as well. They both thought that scene was cool. They hadn't noticed that one of the smaller alligators, that was about 5 feet long, was not mechanical. It ran out of the scene at them. "What the fuck?" Steve screamed at Jamie, putting himself between her and the gator. Jamie saw some weapons on the walls in their hallway and grabbed a mace, hoping it was real, or at least real enough to hurt the gator. "Steve, here!" she yelled, throwing it to him. Amazingly enough, he caught it at the safe end. He choked up on it like a baseball bat, bashing the gator in the head until it stopped moving. They ran through the rest of the hallway, bypassing doors and any mechanical props that popped out to scare them, one of which looked like a cloaked demon. Steve held onto the mace the entire time. They had to make several turns through some complicated hallways, most of which were dead ends. Some of them had a false perspective and got smaller and smaller toward the end, increasing their panic. They finally found a stairway to the second floor. It was wide open. They charged up it, hand in hand. The music getting louder, the strobe lights getting faster, making it more disorienting than it had been. About 3 feet into the hallway at the top of the stairs was another mannequin. They ran into it and screamed, running past it as it wobbled back and forth. This hallway had several doors. They tried all of them, all locked except for one. They ran into that room like their asses were on fire. There, in the room, was Sarah tied down on a table. Strange symbols and burning candles were all throughout the room, on the walls and floor. "Sarah!" they both yelled. She didn't move. The music stopped blaring. Hollow wooden footsteps were running up the hall behind the open door. Jamie turned just in time to see what she couldn't believe, what couldn't be real but horrifyingly was. The mannequin they ran into wrapped its arms around Steve's waist, dragging him out into the hall. He was screaming and trying to bash it with the mace. He managed to get it in the leg before the lights went out. An ear-bleeding scream emitted from the pitch-black hallway. The lights came back on and Jamie rushed to the hallway. Steve was nowhere to be seen. Jamie felt a sharp pain on the back of her head and went down. When she woke up, she was tied to a wooden table next to the table Sarah was on. They both were awake now. "Jamie," Sarah whispered, "what the hell is happening?" Jamie struggled against her bonds. "I have no fucking idea." From the candlelight, they could see nobody else was in the room. Sarah was sobbing inconsolably. "I think they killed Clint. He just dropped. I couldn't open it. I couldn't save him. They got Steve too. I don't know where they took him," Jamie said, also starting to break down. "There was nothing I could do. It just took him away." Clint and Steve woke up in a musty, damp room that looked much like a medieval dungeon. So much so that they were actually shackled to one of the walls. There were some candles around the room, but the little light they provided was of no use nor help. The animatronic butcher from the hallway was a living man and was standing before them. Revving his chainsaw, he leaned into Steve's face, licking the tip of his nose. He let out one of the most evil guttural laughs that didn't sound human. Then began the gruesome dismemberment of Steve. Clint was fighting against the shackles with more than all of his strength, shouting, "No!" Steve was screaming at the top of his lungs the entire time, until the sickening silence. Clint felt the wet warmth of Steve's blood spraying on him. He knew he was next. He knew he couldn't escape no matter how hard he fought. Before the butcher set in on him, he saw the butcher tossing parts of Steve to the largest gators from the show. They were waiting patiently behind the butcher, flicking their tails with their jaws wide open. He knew this was his revolting, disgusting, less than human end. He threw up to the side of him. "Why?" Clint screamed with rage, still trying to fight the shackles. The butcher smiled and said with the same accent they'd been hearing all day, "Is necessary. My babies need to eat and we need to survive." He approached Clint, revving his anxious chainsaw again. Clint stared daggers into his eyes and refused to scream. Over in the sound of their sobbing, Sarah and Jamie started hearing chanting in a different language. The old man from the entrance, the one taking cash and giving tickets, was walking around the tables they were strapped to. He was dragging his fingertips on the tabletops, touching both of their faces. He was wearing a hooded robe. They saw the glint of metal in his hand. It was indeed a dagger. They started freaking out, struggling to free themselves, asking him, "Why are you doing this? Let us go. We won't say anything to anyone. You can believe us. We promise. We just want to live. We don't care about the cops." The old man ignored them. He stood between the tables they couldn't escape from, pulling some dark blue powder out of his pockets. He filled each palm with the powder. He said some more unknown words to them, then blew the powder in their faces. They started convulsing uncontrollably and let out a death rattle. The next day, the police received at least a dozen missing persons reports, all of them with their last known whereabouts being the carnival. 2 cops went out to investigate. Much to their amazement, the entire carnival was gone. Aside from several full and several scattered trash bags throughout the area, all that was left were some discarded snow cone cups, cotton candy cones, a few shiny paper food wrappers, empty drink cups, straws, and empty popcorn bags blowing around in the crisp fall air, chased by some colored leaves. If not for the trash, you would have never known a carnival had been there. There were no cars in the parking lot either, just more trash and cigarette butts. suggesting all the patrons had left before morning. One of the cops looked around, scratching the back of his head. Filthy, carny gypsies leaving their trash everywhere. But this makes no sense. I was just here the other night with my wife and our kids. They were completely up and running. How could they have possibly taken everything apart, down and be gone in one night? I guess they were in a hurry to get to another city, the other cop said, shrugging his shoulders. The first cop put his hand on his hip, looking down at the ground. The wind rushed by. He picked up something that was next to a half-eaten, ant-covered corn dog with both hands. Since when do they make mannequins with nose rings and ear gauges? I don't know, but my kid would love to have that in his band's jam room. The other cop tossed it to him. Here, they obviously didn't want it anymore. There's no sign of foul play. I won't say anything. There's no need. He caught it. Thanks, Bill. We better get back to the station if we want to get any donuts or fried cinnamon rolls before O'Malley annihilates them. 2 weeks later, in another town, Dragomir's Carnivalul Sangalui was in full swing again. A teenage couple were approaching a jewelry stand. There were 3 mannequins, one on the left, 2 on the right of the stand. The one on the left had a gypsy doll in her hand. The girlfriend pointed it out to her boyfriend. That's pretty creepy. I know, it's totally you, baby cakes. I'll see if it's a prize I can win for you somewhere here today. The woman working the stand looked like she was in her mid-20s and was wearing a bone necklace. The girl looked around for a moment before looking at the 2 mannequins on the right side. One had a charm bracelet. The other was wearing a necklace that she really liked. She asked the woman, "Is that necklace for sale?" pointing to it. She turned her head slowly toward her. "Yes, but your man must buy it for you. It must be a gift." He bought her the necklace. "Thanks, honey," she said, giving him a kiss after putting it on. "No prob, babe." The woman handed them 2 tickets. The boyfriend glanced at one of them. "What are these for? What does Casa Skimbari mean?" The woman smiled eerily. "Those are free passes to our haunted house, Casa Skimbari. It means House of Change." "Thanks," the girlfriend said excitedly. She looked up at her boyfriend. "Let's do this when it starts getting dark." "You got it."
Lights flash red, the sky turns black. Romanian nights, there's no turning back. Drums are pounding, the violins scream. The Carnival of Blood's like a fever dream. Mannequins dance in their shadows alive. Whispers in the dark, you'll never survive. Painted faces, a masquerade grin. Step inside, but you'll never leave again. All of the gypsy winds are howling. The blood moon starts to rise. The carnival is calling, with fire in its eyes. In the night, we're lost, we're wild. Mannequins reach their grips beguiled. The carnival of blood takes hold, vanishing like gypsies bold. Spin and scream, there's no escape. The night dissolves, your fate takes shape. We're alive, we're burning bright at the carnival of blood tonight. Red skies, let the chaos flow. Mannequins rise, shadows steal the show. Vanishing fast like a gypsy tune, lost in the haze of the blood moon. Cobblestone streets, echoes of pain. Ghostly laughter in the pouring rain. The Ferris wheel spins with a haunting hum. The carousel plays, but your time has come. Candles flicker, a path of doom. Mirrors shatter in the funhouse room. Every step, a game of chance. Caught in the curse of the mannequin's dance. Gypsy winds are howling, the fire burns untamed. The carnival is calling, but you're trapped inside the game. In the night, we're lost, we're wild. Mannequins reach their grips beguiled. The carnival of blood takes hold, vanishing bends your will. Smoke and shadows, an endless maze. The Carnival of Blood is your final stage. Blood will come again. And when dawn breaks, there's nothing in sight. No calliope laughs as it bends your will. But deep in the hills, you'll hear the refrain. The carnival of blood will come again. There's nothing in sight, no carnival, no screams, no mannequins fright. But deep in the hills, you'll hear the refrain. The carnival of blood will come again.
If you like creepy stories like these, please subscribe to the channel.